It is Monday, June 10th, and all kinds of things are happening in the world, and we'll be talking about them, including the fact that apparently there are shockwaves going on because of certain elections and all along those lines. So we'll definitely be having conversations about that. But apparently, a far right surge has upended national politics. So apparently, there is one of the things that people are talking about as the European Union vote delivers a shift to a right, apparently in a blow to French and German government. So apparently folks are maybe moving a little bit more to the right than the left, but we'll see whether folks agree that this is a national trend and an international trend, or if it's just isolated in Europe. But apparently France is facing a consequential election as a far right route prompts a Macron gamble. So they're saying that he's going to take a gamble now that he's got into some trouble and all along those lines. So they're going to have a snap parliamentary election. So there'll be a quick parliamentary election, and we'll see what goes on in that space. Benny Gantz has resigned from the Israeli war cabinet, so that is something else that is going on. And apparently, Blinken is heading to push for a ceasefire and a hostage release as that Israel and Gaza war continues. So Blinken is to visit Egypt and Israel to push a Gaza deal, and there is some reports that the U.S. may seek a private accord. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And 9 Hindu pilgrims are dead after a militant attack in India's Kashmir. So India is investigating the attack by suspected militants in Kashmir. So that's something going on. Those militants are causing all kinds of havoc all over the world and all in that space. People are, I guess, being excited about the fact that an Israeli raid freed 4 hostages, but unfortunately it also killed at least 274 Palestinians in Gaza. So it looks like a CNN guest has called out for saying that the Israelis rescued from Hamas was a hostage release. So that is something else going on, is how the media is handling some of these things as well. And in Australia, Prime Minister is slamming vandalism of a U.S. consulate with pro-Palestinian graffiti. So apparently people are upset about that, and the Australia Prime Minister has condemned vandalism of the U.S. consulate over the war in Gaza. So that is something else that is in the news and that folks might be talking about as well. And apparently Haiti's interim prime minister is stable after hospitalization for a slight illness. So he's definitely dealing with a lot of troubles. He's trying to bring that country into some semblance of order, but we'll see how this all goes out and what happens, as he just recently got released from a hospital, and they're just saying that was a slight illness and not a major illness. And North Korea's leader's sister is warning of a new response against South Korean loudspeakers. So apparently that is something going on, because they're having all kinds of things going on in that space, because North Korea apparently sent some excrement balloons, so balloons full of human waste. And then apparently the South Korea's response has been blasting BTS hits. And a lot of people will know that that is one of those pop bands that apparently is quite popular with teenagers and all along those lines. So they are going back and forth in that space of trying to get on each other's nerves. So that's something that can take place in a war sometimes of a different sort. But yeah, apparently they are doing that also. And of course, people are still dealing with the fact that Mexico has a new leadership. But, a couple of days after she was elected, one of the people that backed her was shot dead outside of, I believe, her own home, or all along those lines. But definitely a lot of people are responding to this new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, and we'll see how she can do in terms of getting things corrected in that particular country. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken the oath once again as India's prime minister. So that is something that is going on. But he's also having to come up together with a kind of coalition government as well. So that is something that people are talking about also. So, and of course, people are still talking about Rishi Sunak, and folks are saying that, or he's saying that the people can forgive him over his D-Day mistake. So definitely that is something that is going on as well. And the body of a missing British TV presenter, Michael Mosley, has been found on Greek island. So that is something that is going on as well. And Michael Mosley's wife paid tribute to her kind husband as well. But yeah, that looks like that has come to a very sad result, because I know that they were hoping that it would be a better result and they would be able to find him, but that wasn't the case, at least find him alive. But that was not the case. And Iran has approved 6 candidates for the presidential race, but again, they have blocked Ahmadinejad, so definitely he will not be running. But it looks like Iran has approved a list of mostly hardline candidates for the presidential election to replace Raisi. So definitely we'll see how that plays out and how it plays out in world politics as well. And the UN Food Agency is pausing its aid work at the U.S. pier in Gaza over security concerns. So definitely they were trying to give some aid over there, but now there are security concerns, so they are pausing that. And in a first, Hezbollah is trying to down a fighter jet as border fighting has further ratcheted up in that area. So it looks like it's not just Hamas, but also Hezbollah that is involved in this as well. And if you're wondering about Italy, it looked like Italy's Prime Minister Meloni comes out on top in the EU vote, strengthening her hand in that particular area as well. And Hungary newcomer Peter Magyar has shaken Orban's hold on power. So it looks like Hungary's Orban is seeing weakest support in decades in that particular EU vote. So definitely these EU votes could have some both national in their own individual countries as well as international implications. And if you're heading to Wyoming, well, it looks like a part of a Wyoming highway has collapsed in a landslide, and that is blocking crucial commuter transit routes. So definitely that's something that is going on in Wyoming. So it looks like there has been another place where a infrastructure incident has happened as part of their highway collapsed in a landslide. And, you know, we're dealing with it here in North Carolina, and apparently it's being dealt with all over the country, but more sweltering heat is to scorch Arizona and Nevada this week before moving east. So we might even be getting hotter temperatures, and we were already in the 90s here in North Carolina. So they're saying that U.S. faces excessive heat and raucous storms going into the weekend. So that's something else that is in the news as well. And a rodeo bull named Party Bus has escaped an Oregon arena and tosses a woman in red as the crowd runs. So it looks like the particular bull wanted to join the fun and join the spectators. So it looks like it escaped, and it definitely made its run on the folks over there as well. And of course, the Hunter Biden gun trial is resuming and is near conclusion. So it's entering day 6 of criminal trial with the possibility of, I think, Hunter taking the stand. So we'll see if that is the case and whether he will actually take this stand and all in that space. And Trump is to undergo a probation interview for the New York hush money case on Monday afternoon as well. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news. And Trump is complaining about his teleprompters at a scorching Las Vegas rally. So apparently maybe the teleprompters weren't working the way that he wanted it to, and all the way that way. And Kevin O'Leary is touting Trump's vow to nix taxes on tips for service workers, and that will apparently, according to him, help a young generation move forward. So looks like he is going to be nixing the taxes on service workers and all in that space. At least that's what he is saying as well. And a suspect in the 2022 Sacramento mass shooting has died in custody. So attorneys are saying that that took place there in California as well. And it looks like Biden campaign is to air ads during the NBA Finals coverage. So it's like, speaking of the NBA Finals, the Dallas Mavericks are in deep trouble as they are down 0-2, but they're now heading back to their home front. So maybe they can bounce back there. But if they lose another one, then they could be possibly down 0-3. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how folks respond with these ads and how long the ads run, because like I said, I've even had some friends of mine predict a Boston sweep, and they're halfway to that sweep and all along those lines. And definitely, I think the game 2 of the Edmonton and Florida finals in the NHL will be today, if I'm remembering my memory correctly, and all that sense of what's going on in the sports world. So definitely that's something going on, while people are also paying attention to world events like Ukraine. It says that it is the latest generation of Russian fighter jets for the first time. So definitely that's something going on. And Trump has got a surprise last minute endorsement for Sam Brown in the Nevada Senate GOP. So he's still trying to get on his kind of endorsements and see how much impact he can have and all in that space. And the teen who lost a hand and a leg in a Florida shark attack was on their first beach trip with their mom. So doctors on vacation helped save the 15-year-old attack victim that was there in Florida. So, like I said, a lot of things are going on, including the fact that Biden visits a military cemetery that Trump reportedly said was filled with losers. So, definitely a lot of things are going on in the world, including a Border Patrol memo that is telling agents in key sectors to release migrants from nearly all Eastern Hemisphere countries. So definitely, I guess they've been instructed to release them if they're coming from Eastern Hemisphere countries and all in that space. So, like I said, a lot's going on, including the fact that I talked about one shutdown in Wyoming, but there's also a shutdown in Phoenix where the westbound I-10 has been shut down due to a police investigation, and a man dies after being found shot on a crash in I-40 near downtown Phoenix. So police are investigating that and all along those lines. And before I bring other people in, apparently I was talking about Wyoming, but you don't want to go to Montana because apparently Montana's suicide rate is the highest in the U.S. with most involving guns. So like I said, we'll bring in Steve Brown. Glad that Steve's with me and everything. And I've also got Greg Rosner and a number of others as well. So how you doing, Steve? I'll turn it over to you.
Good. I'm just going to open up real quick. I'm not feeling very well today, so I'm going to take off, try to get some rest. Real quickly, just wanted to hope everyone had a good weekend. It's graduation season. Lots of exciting things going on with graduations. And, there's been, continued focus on Trump. Biden elections, and Trump's leading in North Carolina by a few points. There was some news about Macron wanting to look into the rise of right-wing parties in France.
Right.
And, of course, continued focus on Israel with, the United States calling for a ceasefire. And, just a big day at the French Open with kind of the torch being passed to Alcaraz, who now was the 7th Spaniard to join, and looking all eyes on Wimbledon with Djokovic out for the rest of the year. He might play the Olympics. I think Nadal is pretty much done. He might be back for one more round next year. And, of course, everyone's really upset about NBC not being renewed as the commentator for, French Open. And there's rumors that they're going to be abandoning Wimbledon as well. So many of us in the tennis industry love John McEnroe's commentary of the finals. And now we're going into hopefully they'll keep him at least for the U.S. Open. But there's nothing like Johnny Mac on a Sunday when you're watching a Grand Slam final. And I hope he's there to stay. But with that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Mark. I got to
hand it back over to you. I know you got to run and everything.
Yeah, I'll be back
tomorrow. I'm just curious before you head out and everything. A couple of things. One, I think that Carolina is into the College World Series, and I think State plays today to see if they can make it, and all along those lines. And I think today is the big day that a major college basketball announcement will be made, because I think that Dan Hurley, who is the coach of Connecticut, is supposed to tell folks whether or not he is going to become the new coach for the Los Angeles Lakers and deal with all of those adult egos, and maybe even help LeBron get his son Bronny into the league and everything. But I didn't know your thoughts, particularly around state, because like I said, I know Carolina won 2-0, unfortunately, against your West Virginia Pioneers, because that's who they beat in order to get there and everything. And now state is playing, and I know that they split. I think they won handily against Georgia, and then Georgia walloped them in the second game. And then I think they're supposed to play today in the rubber match.
Yeah. I was, obviously tired, upset that West Virginia lost, but happy that Carolina won. But I don't follow the World Series. And speaking of, June 20th is West Virginia's birthday. So we're going to be celebrating that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting World Series. And I don't know who won the NBA game last night. I guess
that's what I was just saying earlier. Boston won, so they're up 2-0, and now they've got to head to Dallas.
Okay, well, and Cynthia Marshall, she's the CEO of the Mavericks, and she is from Cary, North Carolina. So, and she ran the AT&T company here. So it's amazing. She came out of retirement from Mark Cuban. But I got to run, guys. I'll be back tomorrow to open up the show and be here for the whole hour. But I have a hard stop. Have a great week, everybody. Lots going on in the world. And remember, we've got Economics Monday at 11, which I will not be on with David Walker. And then, of course, media. And then there's the world politics tomorrow. We're going to continue our discussion. But thank you so much.
All right. No doubt about that. Yeah, no doubt about that. I appreciate that and everything. Hey, Nick, you get around the world all the time, and you get around the country as well, because I know you're over there in Salt Lake sometimes and all along those lines. And I'm trying to understand it because, like I said, that might even be where Christy Noem's from, but I can't remember and everything. But what is it about Montana? Because when I saw that news article, I was going to ask you about that just in general, because I'm going like, their suicide rate is the highest in the U.S. They're not that. I mean, it's a relatively small state compared to some of the more major states. So what is it with Montana that would cause them to have this kind of suicide rate?
Seasonal affection disorder. As a matter of fact, it exists in the Scandinavian countries, the state of Washington, et cetera. Now, what that is, pardon?
I agree.
Yeah, it's seasonal affection disorder. Yeah, in other words, what happens is, Mark, people become depressed because they can't see the sun. When I was over in England, I started getting a little because I'm come from Florida, and I go, you don't see the sun, and it just affects you psychologically. And so what happens is there are people that live in Oregon, Washington, Montana, that during wintertime, they get affected with seasonal affection disorder, and then the suicide rates go up. And that's one reason that area is so high. So are the Norwegian countries. Now, it's really funny. In the Scandinavian countries, they have the happiest people in the world, yet the most suicides. It's very weird, but that's because of the SAD effect. And the way to get out of the SAD effect is to leave the state and go to sunny climates. I'm not kidding. But we're not educated in that area because we're too busy looking at The Voice on TV or Jimmy Kimmel Live. Sorry, I'm going to slap him around a little bit, Rick. And we don't look at stuff like that. Yeah, Rick.
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, up against the mountains and to the west of us. So the sun would go down at 3:30 in the afternoon in the winter. And yeah, I would get bummed out and I get behind in my classes. And then so we're not that far north, north of Colorado is Wyoming. And only after Wyoming, you got Montana on top of that. So you have the sun going down, before 4 p.m. Also, Montana is a giant state. So the people are very spread out. So, if you don't have enough human contact because your neighbor is like 3 miles away, maybe people can't, without people checking in on you, it might be easy to start getting bummed out and shoot yourself. Another thing to do for seasonal affective disorder is they sell light boxes, and you light yourself up with light that mimics natural light, and that's supposed to make people feel a little better. I don't know how people in Canada deal, because Canada's north of Montana.
They're called SAD lamps, and the thing is, we used to have one because this is a real problem. I mean, I'm surprised that the media didn't talk about it as much, and it affects people differently. Like I said, I didn't get affected like my wife did. No, certain people get affected different. And when I was living in Washington, I did get affected when I was in the United Kingdom.
Oh, wow.
But that's because it was the coming from Florida, and then you get this, you go into the United Kingdom, which was when I was in Oxford, I never saw the sun, and I was going like, this is really, freaks you out. It's like I just got back from Florida, from North Carolina, and all of a sudden I felt the heat. Now, when I grew up there, I never felt it because I became acclimatized to it. I was used to lows of 84, highs of 97. But coming from North Carolina, I'm not used to now the heat that you walk outside and all of a sudden, bang, you're in an oven any time of the day. So you have to hide for cover and stuff like that. So I think that's the real problem. But maybe Sasha or somebody from Canada can tell us why Canadians aren't affected by seasonal affective disorder. We were talking about that. We don't get to see the sun. It's a big problem in the Pacific Northwest. Suicides and depression.
Yep.
Why it is not in Toronto, I don't know. Maybe it is. In other words, the Canadians are weird. But remember, they like hockey. They like cold weather.
Right now, their hockey team, I think, is down 0-1, if I remember correctly, and that's the Edmonton Oilers. But they could bounce back against your team, which is Florida, and all along those lines. So we'll see if they bounce back since it's Canada against the United
Florida.
States.
See, here's the thing with hockey in Florida. I didn't grow up with hockey. I don't like hockey. I don't care for hockey. It's a Canadian sport. And they have two teams in Florida, and the other university I went to, University of Denver, they're like the national champs in hockey. But because I didn't grow up with it, I don't give a rat's rear about hockey. I saw one hockey game during my career because my brother was an announcer for the Tampa Bay, whatever they have. And that's it. To me, it's a stupid game. I followed the chess tournament that was in the National Open this weekend. I'll follow that before I will hockey.
Well, speaking of stupid things,
so there is not on my radar screen.
No, I got you. It's not on your radar. But speaking of stupid things, and this I got to ask Rick about because he used to be two things I'm going to ask Rick about because he used to be a party bouncer, among other things that he has done and everything in that space. But I'm sure that there was a number of people that were involved in the weed traffic, that being marijuana and everything. But apparently a very popular space in terms of where rich folks like to go is about to run out of pot. And that is Martha's Vineyard. And this, Nick, you'll love this, has led to a lawsuit. So there's a lawsuit because apparently people are upset and they are trying to figure out how they can get to it, because there's also a scramble by regulators, because I guess that's an area where you're supposed to be able to get it, and residents say a rule change could help. So apparently the folks in Martha's Vineyard, which we know is known as a affluent area and everything, are upset because they can't get their weed. So what's up with Martha's Vineyard, and why do they need all this weed in Martha's Vineyard?
They don't. I don't know what's going on there. Martha's Vineyard is like an isolated island. I was there quite often because the president of Bausch and Lomb had a house there. So I went to visit him, and so did Jacqueline Kennedy, NASA. So I ran into her at one of the events there. But I mean, that's a rich low life thing to say you need to take pot. Come on, grow up.
So my experience in nightclubs was more with cocaine. I started bouncing bars in Boulder, and I saw a lot of coke. And
Hunter Biden came in. Is that what you're saying?
Boulder was one of the national capitals. And
Boulder, yeah, the Dark Horse. There we go.
I worked at the Dark Horse for a little while.
I used to eat at the Dark Horse. It was a great place. It's still.
I think it's still there. It might be going out of business, being replaced by development. But I don't know if anybody here has ever hung out with people who do cocaine. They're very annoying. They never go to sleep, and they tell the same story like once an hour.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah, they tell the same story over and over.
Yeah,
the same story over and over again.
like I do. Like I don't know. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, same concept. But the thing is, I think the drug culture is its own little thing. But when I was growing up, everybody was smoking marijuana, and when I was
but it was wimpy marijuana. Like I tried to get stoned as a kid, and I never could even. I just tried. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to experience, but like I'd smoke 3 joints, and it wouldn't do any. It was wimpy stuff back then. Now it's 40 times as strong as it used to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't, like I said, I don't
I
hang
don't
out
mess with
with
the substance. Like I said, I
you
might
know.
have a drink.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that people are doing now, which is quite interesting, is that because actually we had an event at one of our the cultural arts center I work at, and that was yesterday. It was actually a performance of blues and blues history, because the gentleman was talking about Mississippi and all along those lines. But the distributor, because we sometimes have a drink distributor, he was selling wine, but he was also selling CBD drinks. So apparently CBD drinks are becoming very popular. So this is kind of like cannabis infused liquor and all along those lines. I think he said some of this stuff is 150 proof and all along those lines. But apparently this is a new market
Well, CBD
in
is
the industry and everything, where there is some of these new.
CBD doesn't get you high. It's supposed to have therapeutic properties, but THC is the part of pot that gets you high.
Well, you know, if you want
Yes.
something therapeutic, you may want to drink wine, because apparently the thing is, because of the resveratrol effect, it extends lives. Laboratory rats in Canada. Or,
The trouble is, you take resveratrol, which is a little expensive. Your liver knocks it out. The only way to get the real benefits from it is the mice don't take pills. The mice are injected. You need to get it directly into your
Oh,
bloodstream.
really? Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so
98% of it is knocked out by your liver.
Well,
wow.
hey, but the other question I was going to ask you, Rick, and this comes back to another one, and we sometimes talk about this on this network, and apparently it was a miracle that nobody got killed, but apparently there was a Wisconsin rooftop party, and apparently 10 were injured because they were up there having a fun time, and the guests had to have a party, and maybe somebody brought some gunplay into what was supposed to be a good time, and there were multiple injuries after the fires were shot in the apartment building. So it was a rooftop in a apartment and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, what are we thinking about the accessibility of guns in general? Because like I said, I don't know that the parties I used to go to when I was at Marquette, I don't remember anybody carrying guns, but if they were carrying them, they shouldn't tell me and everything. So what is our thoughts when people are apparently carrying guns on a regular? And by the way, this was in Madison, Wisconsin, which is their state capital and everything. So what's our thoughts about the accessibility of guns?
You have to pretend you're in the mafia, and whenever you walk into a public space, you have to case out the space to see where the exits are. You have to have an exit plan. Like if all hell breaks loose, which way are you going to go? What are you going to take cover behind? You know, if you're sitting in we had that guy, that Israeli guy, on talking about self-defense techniques, and we talked about where to sit in a restaurant. And he says, not only should you sit with your back to the wall, but you should know what the wall is made of and what's behind it. So if it's just drywall, you know, all hell could break loose in the space behind you, and bullets could fly through the wall. But, you know, like I generally, when I walk into a place, like have an idea of what I do, or if I'm with my wife or whatever, where we'd go.
Okay, for me, it's just a lost cause. I mean, this country is a lost cause. So I'll be in the European countries, which are safe. Canada, where Sasha is safe, and the United States, they're full of themselves, and they're fooling themselves. Why they're full of themselves? There were a lot of people in New Zealand when I was down there, and they told me all the places they're traveling. I said, why don't you come to America? So the United States isn't safe. I mean, that's the world kind of knows that this place is basically a jungle. The sad part is you go to Central America, it's worse, and South America is bad. And so the thing is, the Americas are just, you know, you're a backward nation. China's safer. Isn't that weird? You know, you'd be better off in mainland China or even Russia than the United States, except for the stupid war.
If you keep your mouth shut. Yeah, you don't. But
if you keep your mouth shut, you're safe.
You go to Russia as long as you don't like protest it.
Yeah, but you can't go to Russia right now because they hate Americans. So the thing is, forget Russia. Russia's on the out. But in the United States, you really have to seriously consider, why would you live here? I mean, you know, if you have another choice. If you don't have a choice, you're stuck. I mean, there's a lot of people who are stuck in life. But if you do have a choice, you have to ask yourself your question: why would you live in a place like this? Doesn't make any sense. So,
It used to be the
out there in Europe, baby.
But
I'll be
that used to be the popular refrain when people would complain about different things in society, including racism and all along those lines. Because one of the refrains that you used to hear people say all the time was, if you don't love the country, leave the country. And they would tell civil rights protesters, and they would tell other people that as well. I've heard that refrain for years, and a lot of times the response to that refrain is that if I think that the country is a great country and I can work to change it from within, then I will do that. And that's the refrain that many people give when they were given that answer. That answer has been, just wrapping up really quick, that answer has been going on for decades. I know a lot of people have told folks that.
You only get to live one life, and you have to just recognize the place you're in. And if you go to places in Africa, this whole racism stuff doesn't exist. And frankly, a lot of places in Europe, it doesn't exist. It's just a big thing here in the United States, but also it's such a diverse country that, and it has a history of this racism. It's not going to go away. So the only question is,
if you do the math, the U.S. 36,000, 37,000 Americans die from gunshots every year, 100 a day. Half of those are suicide. So you take that. So that's 18,000 Americans get shot to death by other people every year, which is a rate of about 1 in 18, 19,000, which, I mean, it's disturbingly high, but odds are still in your favor that you're just not going to get shot at random.
Yeah, no, that's true. That I would say that is one factor. But then also, if you look at the obesity rate in the United States and the health rates in the United States, the average life expectancy in Spain, 84. In the United States, it's like 77. Happiest people in the world, Denmark. I mean, I would go there, except it's too bloody cold for me. I'm used to warmer climates. And so the thing is, if you have a choice, so I put that in there, and you only get to live one life. Do you want to spend your life fighting all the morons? And there's 330 million people, and of them, how many are morons? I have no clue, but there's a percentage of them that tend to dominate the politics in the U.S. Or do you want to go somewhere else? Because you have that, to the extent you have that freedom, you're free to choose. So yeah, and I always hear these people, oh, if Trump wins, these stupid celebrities, I'm going to leave the country. And they never do it, But see, I'm going to do it because I already got my plane tickets. I got everything except my permanent visa there, which is a real pain in the neck to get. And our immigration policy, I got all these forms I got to fill out to go over to Spain. I mean, tons of work. Here, Biden just opens the border. Oh, come on in.
Well, speaking of open borders and everything, I'm very confused about something. And Rick, I need you to clarify something for me, because I know we were taping the show last night, apparently shortly after the incident happened. So maybe some of your co-workers on Naked at Night saw it as they were leaving our taping this morning and everything. But apparently, and I don't know, there's a lot of things that you might want to loot and everything, but apparently they're in South Los Angeles, and AutoZone store was looted, and it happened at 4 a.m. This morning. So apparently a bunch of people went in there and were looting the AutoZone. So what exactly are you trying to get from an AutoZone?
Well, all right. So they were doing burnouts. They were doing the drift thing in the middle of a big intersection. And I don't know, but often it's not what use you'd have for the stuff. It's that you can sell the stuff on eBay. There was a big article, and I think we talked about it on the show, that Legos are huge items for theft in Southern California, because a little box Legos are a premium toy now, and among collectors, like a little Lego box that has like that makes a Star Wars figure, or like a Darth Vader helmet or whatever, it can go for $40. If it's a collector's item, $500. So yeah, people will steal stuff to resell. If you get a suspiciously good deal on Legos, or maybe windshield wipers now on eBay, it might be stolen.
Could be. Maybe that's what they were doing and everything. Hey, Sasha, really quickly, getting back to a more hard issue and all along those lines, but a lot of people around the world are noticing a shift from the left to the right, and they're talking about that even in the EU. And earlier, before you got here, I was talking about a number of countries, including France, and I think even well, Hungary already was under a dictator, but a number of countries were talking about this shift to the right. And you definitely study politics and all along those lines, both not just in Canada, but internationally. So I was just wondering your take, because apparently this has even impacted the German government. So what is it that is making people go more to the right than the left? Because it does seem like, at least internationally, there is a far right surge.
First of all, you have to define what is right, what is left. And then it would be easier to understand why and what and when it's happening. So it's a common knowledge, I would think, that on the right, it means people feel less inclined to believe in the democratic symbols as everybody's right to whether it's education or a job market or even such thing as the religious preferences or so on. And that could be the case in case of Europe, because they are being tired after the dozens of years indiscriminate welcoming all these African, Asian, Middle Eastern immigrants that definitely changes the fabrics of society. And it's no longer the same Europe that was 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's very different right now. And I think people are revolting, and probably one of the reasons that United Kingdom left European Union is they didn't want to share the immigration policies of European Union. That's why they got out. And I think this explains everything. What other reasons? There are probably, but I'm not aware of them.
I've got some reasons. So let's call it fascism. For one thing, fascism offers easy answers. Elect me the strong man, I'll take care of everything. Another thing is war. World war inoculates you for a while against more war, because people see how terrible it is. But we haven't had a world war in 80 years. Right. So maybe people forgot. Another thing is Russia spreads discord via propaganda. Social media propaganda is one of the cheapest ways to increase discord and anger in Western countries. And Russia spends $30 million a year. I always talk about it. They've got an office building in St. Petersburg that is just full of internet trolls, and all they do all day is send social media out pretending to be people in these countries to get people worked up against each other.
That makes a lot of sense. Everything. There was something, because I was actually going to mention on your show yesterday, but I didn't get to it and everything, because I know Lance would have had an interesting answer. But I'd love to hear from everybody here on this panel, because I've heard that there is we talk about Israel and we talk about what's going on there, but there is a rise in a religion that is part of that war and everything, because apparently there are 1.4 billion Muslims around the world, and I've heard some reports, and a lot of the growth is in Asia and Africa, but that it may actually catch up with and possibly even overtake Christianity by the year of 2050. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that and how that could impact the kind of world order, for lack of a better term, because I've also heard that Hindu is on the rise, and apparently the non-affiliated and those that are not associated with religion are apparently on a downward spiral. But I just wondering.
So Lance, my arguing partner on my show, doesn't like the Muslim religion at all, and is worried that Muslims are going to take over the world because they reproduce faster than Whitey does. And I'm like, if you want to worry about something, we had 1.2 billion Muslims, 20 years ago. Now we have 1.4 billion.
Right.
So we had 0 AIs 10 years ago, and my friend who works in the field of AI says we will have 1 trillion AIs by the year 2100. So if you want to freak out about something, don't worry about frickin' Muslims, who are, most of whom are just people just regular people who want to live their lives. Like when you look at Catholics, there are a ton of Catholics. And to be a believing Catholic, you have to believe in all sorts of like crazy nonsense. And so I know a lot of good, decent Catholic people who can't possibly believe some of the stuff that they're supposed to believe. Ditto for Muslims. There's a lot of crazy crap you have to believe to believe in, to really be observant in a religion. And most people follow their religions, but it's a hollowed out version where it coincides with their life. And when you've got 1.4 billion Muslims, some of them are going to be dangerous assholes just because you take any big group and a small percentage are going to be dangerous.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Rick. But just really quick on that same note, there are two countries, one that I think is communist, the other that is definitely not communist, but they have come up, and I mentioned this at the beginning of my monologue and everything, with a very interesting idea of how to fight each other, because North Korea and South Korea are going at each other. But one of them is, I'm just going to call it what it is, they're sending shit balloons to the other country. And the other one is blasting BTS hits. And that's like K-pop and all along those lines. So is this a better way for us to fight wars, is to kind of like have these kind of things that are less harmful?
Yes. Everybody remembers that Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk had to fight that big lizard, which was a guy in a rubber costume. And instead of having a war, it was one guy versus one lizard. So yeah, poop versus K-pop hits is a great way to fight a war.
Yeah, it sounds very progressive, but it's kind of a waste of time. But I thought this is pretty interesting. You brought this up, Mark. Tax on tips, that Donald Trump said we shouldn't pay tax on tips. And I tend to agree with him on this, because the people that are living off tips, it's not guaranteed money. They're not high end. And the thing is, and frankly, the mobility in the United States really does suck. I don't know why they don't show about the Gini coefficient and how bad it is for somebody to move from one class to another, and why we were taxing tips to begin with. So I would totally agree just to remove the tax on tips and give people a chance. In the United States, you don't even have a chance now to move up in the social ladder, unless I think you move to San Francisco and buy a lottery ticket on whatever the best stock is out there. But other than that, the average American will live and die in the same class that they were born in. It is really bad here. And the teachers don't tell you about it, and the media doesn't tell you about it, because they want you to believe in this illusion that America is the land of opportunity. It's not anymore.
But Dick, hasn't that illusion been going on for a while? Because
today, what's the Gini coefficient right now, Rick? Are you looking that up?
No, I'm looking. Like, there are a bunch of states where if you are a tipped employee, if you work for tips, your employer is allowed to pay a ridiculous minimum.
$2.37 an hour.
Like, so Montana, $4 an hour. And so, like, right. if you're working in a donut shop and your boss says, you get tips. Yeah, maybe you get like $8 in tips for a 4-hour, 5-hour shift. Yeah, but you're getting Arizona $3 an hour. Florida.
Nick, hold on a second.
Why? People don't realize how bad it really is. There's this great book. Here it is, Poverty by America. Yeah. And really, it demonstrates how the upper class keeps the lower class.
But Nick, along that same lines and everything. But Nick, along that same lines, I was actually had the pleasure this weekend of going to two. One to some friends of mine that do African drumming, and the other was a R&B band. But there were two concerts that I had the pleasure of attending. It wasn't not working them. I just was going as a fan. But I stopped by the food truck, and the gentleman actually told me something that I had not thought about, because I have a debit card, and the debit card was it needs to be replaced at some point. So it was acting a little bit out of order and everything. And I was telling him to write down the numbers, because I've done that before. And he told me that he would never do that, because that is two reasons. One, if he writes down the number, it was going to increase his cost as a food truck operator, because apparently there's some service fees if you write that down. And he was also bringing up, because I know we used to have Rex Lee on, this notion of it can be very much of a cybersecurity risk for both you and him. meaning the food truck operator. So
Yeah.
I definitely was thinking about that, and I told him that I would discourage myself from doing that, because I've done that a couple of times where I've had people write down the number, and he was like, that is hazardous to him as a operator and all along those lines. So I was understanding what he was saying, and I had not thought about it and everything. So there are hidden costs that we sometimes don't think about, is my whole purpose of what I'm talking about.
So Hawaii, your employer can pay you $1.25 an hour if you average $20 in tips per shift. So you could work an 8-hour shift. Your employer could pay you $10 and you get $20 in tips, $30 for an 8-hour shift. That's less than $4 an hour.
Yeah, and then you have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes, so the government takes 15.3% away.
Yeah, so I mean, Trump doesn't have that many good ideas, but this seems like one of them.
This is a good idea. Otherwise, this is the book of America. Poverty. By the way, this is the book that they should read in school. Poverty by America. So the kids, when they grow up here, they'll know the real problems that exist in the United States. And frankly, they're odds-on favorite. They're one of them. Rather than say, "Hey, we're going to learn about Latin. We're going to learn."
But Nick, how many?
We're going to learn racial studies. Look, it's not a racial equity and inclusion. It's just a bunch of garbage when both sides are poor. Okay, this is what they need to read.
No, hold a second. Speaking of racial equality and everything, there was a major news story that I saw over the weekend that might actually shock people, and it actually comes down to immigration, because apparently Ireland elected for its first ever, I want to say she was prime minister, I gotta look it up, but it was a woman of African descent. I think she's originally from Kenya, and they had never elected anybody in that position. So I was seeing that they had elected her, I think it was over the weekend, and all along those lines. And apparently she had moved there from Kenya with her family sometime back and everything. But there was a lot of that firstism that I talk about as well, because people were excited that she was the first ever there in Ireland elected African of African descent political leader, because I want to say she was.
Ireland is actually doing very well politically, but they've also decided to become very serious. They're doing very well economically. Right. They became serious about doing well economically. In other words, they decided that they were going to enter into very favorable tax treaties with other worlds, including the United States. So they give tax breaks for major companies to headquarter there. So Google moved their headquarters there. Facebook did. Microsoft did. Oh, we thought they were American. Yeah, you thought. But basically, the thing is, they basically created these subsidiaries overseas, especially in Ireland, to take advantage of the tax treaties there. So the country,
economically, Ireland is 14th out of 34 EU countries. It seems like a pretty nice place.
But they used to be way down on the list, and then they became serious about bringing up the economy. And this is one problem you have in the United States. We're too busy watching The Voice. We're watching some of these incredibly. I don't watch TV anymore because they're so stupid. I don't even know the names of the shows that people are watching. But we're too busy watching incredibly stupid shows to do anything to progress forward. And one thing, yes, getting rid of tax on tips would actually move the country forward, but also realize we're going to be competing internationally against China and India, and we're asleep at the wheel. They're going to eat.
Earlier we were talking about seasonal affective disorder. Northern European countries have pub culture where it's winter, it's dark, like 14, 16 hours a day. People get bummed out. You go to your pub, you get drunk with your friends, and that gets you through the winter.
Really? Okay. Well,
I guess that. I mean, we don't have pub culture. We don't. But
apparently, just to come back, it was Northern Ireland, by the way, and apparently, because I think Rishi Sunak might have some Kenyan roots as well, and of course, we know Barack definitely had some Kenyan roots, but apparently Kenya is doing well in being elected leaders of these countries, because the woman's name is Lillian Sinoe Barr, and she was elected in Northern Ireland and everything. So definitely she was recently elected in that position. So people are, I guess, being excited about the fact that she has come from Kenya. And apparently it is one of the articles, according to The Nation, is showing that Kenya is shining in the community of nations as it's, and I'm quoting them, saying that they're industrious people from Kenya are leading by example. So they're not necessarily just leading, they're just giving it lip service, but they're actually leading by example. That's the word I was looking for.
So one more thing about seasonal affective disorder, when the days start getting darker and shorter, we feel compelled to eat sweets and carbs. And if you look at all our holidays, the first big carb holiday is Halloween. You eat candy. Then Thanksgiving, you stuff yourself. Then Christmas, eggnog, you get drunk, you eat a ton. Then one of then Super Bowl is one of our modern, eat holiday. And then maybe our last eat a ton holiday is Valentine's Day.
Didn't you forget one? Because aren't we going to come up on one next month? Because a lot of people will.
Well, 4th of July. All right, that breaks my principle that because we eat a ton on 4th of July too. But this is America. We eat a ton all the time.
Yeah, we definitely eat a ton, and like I said, a lot of folks are eating on a continuous basis and all along those lines. So definitely, it'll be interesting to see what goes on with this eating of tons of food and everything. Hey, Sasha, just really quickly, because I know that I think Blinken is at it again and everything, but is there going to be any semblance of a ceasefire between Israel, and are we going to get more? Because I know we had the 4 hostages are rescued and everything. Are we going to get more rescue? And also your thoughts about Mr. I think it's Gantz that was recently dropped from the Israel coalition government and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on where we are and whether there will be a end to this Middle East struggle in the near future, or are we like Ukraine looking at it for the long haul?
Well, it's not going to be anytime soon any ceasefire or anything like this. There are no basis for ceasefire. And look, if you remember 1945, there could have been ceasefire between Germans and American and England forces, or between German and Russian forces, or between all of them all at once. Yes, sure, it could have been. Theoretically, everything could have been, but it didn't happen. Because Germany, same as Japan, who actually initiated World War II, the only logical conclusion of it would be capitulation of these 2 countries, which actually took place. It's happened, right? And what Hamas did, and there are people telling me that Hamas is different from Palestinians. Come on, I don't buy that narrative, because all these hostages who were freed just 2 days ago, they were with Palestinian families. So the Palestinian families, that's those who kept them in captivity. So they were accomplices of Hamas, because Hamas didn't have perhaps manpower needed to keep this captives. So anyway, there's a narrative about 2-state solution. That's another lunacy, because how you can create second state which its aim would be to destroy Israel. So that's another no-go situation. So there is not going to be a 2-state solution. There is not going to be ceasefire. All that shows that indeed only capitulation of Hamas and to free all hostages, because if they are not freed, the Israelis will do such complex and brilliant operations as they did with this release of these hostages, because they were in 2 different locations. So they had to attack both locations at precisely the same time, because if it wouldn't be done so precisely, so then they would warn the other captors to either kill them or to hide them in different places. So it was done absolutely brilliantly, all at the same time exactly, and all of them were free. That's nothing like that ever happened before. So Israeli public has absolutely no appetite for any ceasefire, two-state solution, and all that stuff. Absolutely, and it's not there.
So numerically, it can't go on forever. Hamas started out with 30 to 40,000 troops, but of course, in a guerrilla deal like that, it's hard to tell exactly who's Hamas and who isn't. But now they're down to, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 Hamas, and the Israeli army has 300,000 troops. So, it could go on for another 6 months or a year, but eventually, 300,000 troops are going to whittle down 10,000 Hamas.
Unless it spreads, which apparently it already is, because Hezbollah is fighting on the other side and all along those lines. So that could be interesting. I know we've only got a few more minutes to go before we have to get to Economics Monday and all along those lines. I was going to say that on Coco McMillan's show, she had a gentleman that runs one of the New York City mosque on, and he was talking about some of the misconceptions in his mind that are going on from the standpoint of the way people perceive Muslims and all along those lines. So you might want to go and watch that interview because it was quite fascinating. I sometimes jump in, but I didn't jump in on that one. So they were having this whole conversation, and it was definitely interesting because Coco had spent some time in a country that has a large Muslim population, that being Morocco and everything. And also a correction, it wasn't prime minister, it was mayor that she was elected. So that is a big difference in terms of the jobs and everything. So I definitely want to make that correction so some folks know that I am following the news correctly and all in that space. But yeah, she was getting a lot of tout for having this first time job and all along those lines. But go ahead, Sasha, we got to wrap up in a few minutes.
I'd like to tell you very quickly about very unique event in Toronto yesterday. There was a march for Israel. There were 50,000 plus people, and not all of them Jews. There were a lot of secular people and from other religious organizations. There were a few pro-Palestinian people who were immediately arrested and thrown out of this. Police was very well organized and made sure that there were no atrocities. And one of the things what they did, they immediately identify the pro-Palestinian supporters and immediately isolated them and took them out. So things like this happening. People finally are waking up to understand what is the difference between Israel, who gave the all civilization that exists today in Europe and North America from the barbarians who are hiding behind Islam and saying that Islam is the religion of peace or so on. So what is that religion of peace on 9/11? What was that religion of peace on October 7th? I've seen none. Maybe you did. That's
Well,
it.
I've got friends that are Muslims. I actually got a friend that is married to a Christian, and I saw the Christian woman yesterday, and I know that the gentleman is very much a peaceful gentleman. I've also seen some folks that are selling everything from bean pies to a number of other things that are very peaceful and all along those lines. So I can't say that it is a non-peaceful religion. Maybe your experiences have been one with it being very violent, and there are even some people, and that could be a whole nother debate as to how much they were engaged in 9/11 and whether they had some allies that might have been helping them from the West and the U.S. But that could be a whole nother debate.
So every large demographic is going to have a certain percentage of people who are creeps.
Right.
If you look at the 9/11 hijackers, most of them, if they hadn't been Muslim, but had been the same kind of, were incels, the guys who can't get laid because they're creepy and weird. And most of those hijackers were susceptible to, propaganda that sucked them into the plot because they were freaking angry weirdos. Now, we can argue about the principles of Islam and what's in the Quran, but, most Muslims are regular people leading regular lives, and it's the murderous creeps who are doing the super bad stuff.
Yeah, but I would agree with that. I actually worked with one at the testing company I worked with, and they actually, because of the different prayer rituals that they had, they actually made exceptions for him to do his prayer at a certain time and all along those lines. And that was before the pandemic, but after 9/11 and all in that space. So yeah, definitely they have different belief systems, and some of them are quite interesting. Like I said, the gentleman that I was talking about apparently is going to be teaching a bunch of his fellow mosque participants, because he's a music producer, and at least he has been in the past, but he is also a archery teacher. So he's going to be teaching a bunch of people the art of archery in the one of the particular mosques here in this area. So I would agree with you, and we're going to get out of here because we got Economic Monday.
Right.
That it is oftentimes a variety of people across both ends of the spectrum.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.